Welcome back to my channel. This is Psychic Medium Raymond Guzman, and today I am going to be discussing story time, something that I haven't really done on this channel, but I'm going to be discussing my personal experiences with angels. And I've done a podcast just the other day with my friend Pamela Williams. If you haven't checked that out, it is under my playlist under podcast, and I'm going to also put this under that because I do consider this to be like a YouTube podcast in many ways. So I've had a lot of paranormal experiences, if you want to call them that. I have had a lot of experiences with my angels, and I love my angels, my guardian angels, and then my archangels, which are Archangel Michael, Archangel Metatron, and Archangel Uriel. So I have these three, and also Archangel Raphael. So I have four of these particular archangels that I love working with, and that they do help me here in my journey here in the physical world. I wanted to talk about, different things that we go through. So when I was born for a lot of people, I never share this with anyone. I was born with a concaved chest. What this means is that my chest wall was pushed in. It was I was born like that, pushed in, and it was centimeters away from basically touching my heart. And this is something where my parents discovered it at a very young age and took me to a cardiologist. And the cardiologist told them that basically he was going to try to correct it with medicine. And if it didn't correct at all, then I would require open heart surgery at some point in my life. So he decided to put me on some iron pills, and the iron pills actually helped push the bones. I was born with weak bones. So it pushed the bones of the chest wall out. And he said that it had corrected. So, in many ways, I feel like this was a miracle, and angels were surrounding me during this time. I was very young. I don't remember this at all. But this is from what my parents have told me, that, many years ago, this story of, things that I had gone through when I was very little. This is kind of so touching, and I'm getting emotional just talking about this because I never share this. I don't like to be vulnerable so much, and I think that's something that, I'm learning to finally let go and be vulnerable, and it's okay to be vulnerable, because I am ultimately someone who's authentic. I'm not someone who, puts on a facade or anything of that nature. So if I get emotional during this story time, please forgive me. And I'm glad I'm not doing it on camera because I can already feel like my eyes are watering up. So and my voice is shaky. But my next experience that I had with my angels was around the age of 6 years old. I want to say I was about 5 or 6 years old. And basically my parents had divorced at the time. They divorced when I was 4 years old, and I lived with my mom, and we were at this hospital, and we were at the cafeteria. The cafe sold food, so sometimes my mom would take me there so that we could spend some time eating, something from the cafeteria. Because I know it sounds kind of odd. It's just a hospital, right? And it's a cafeteria, but they do serve, tea and stuff like that. Well, that particular day, they were selling, they had hot tea. Not selling, but they really had hot tea. They have it all the time. And for those of you that are not familiar with it, back then they didn't have the tea. This was in the late 80s, 1988, somewhere around that time period. They had just boiling hot water in a container, one of these industrial type of restaurant type of containers, and they had styrofoam cups, the 8-ounce styrofoam cups. And basically you had to put the hot water, the boiling water, into the cup, and then they had tea bags. And so my mom fixed hers, and I was, being a Gemini, I'm a Gemini, and being a Gemini child, I was always stubborn, and I wanted to do things my way and not listen. And I was stubborn, I was impatient. And my mom told me not to touch the cups. She's always been a responsible parent. So this was definitely not her fault, what I'm about to explain that happened to me, but more so myself, and give me a moment. I'm so sorry. Okay, so I was with her and I saw her pour her tea. I grabbed the styrofoam cup, and I just took it upon myself to go ahead and pour the hot water into the cup, thinking that I would be able to hold it and it wouldn't burn me. But for whatever reason, after I poured the hot cup of boiling water, this was boiling. It I poured it. It somehow just came towards me, and I lost because it was so hot in my little hands, and I couldn't hold it. And the whole boiling water came pouring, basically down on my stomach area, all of it. I cried so bad, and when I lifted up my shirt, just skin, layers of skin were just lifting up. The ladies, the cafeteria ladies that were serving, the food, they had some cold towels and rags, buckets, cold rags. So they gave me one, and luckily we were in the hospital, so I was rushed to the ER department. And I remember blacking out for a moment from everything that was going on. But I remember waking up on one of the beds in the ER, and these nurses coming with buckets of iced water and towels, and basically they were putting these towels on my stomach where I had been burned. These were third-degree burns. Every time they placed a towel on my skin, a layer of skin was coming off, and it was painful. It was so painful. Can't describe the pain that a person goes through, but it was very painful. And I do feel that even though I did go through this, that my guardian angels were those nurses. And if they're listening in, I don't remember these nurses, but wherever they are, I just want to send them my love and blessings for being earth angels and helping me, and the doctor as well that came in. The doctor told my mom the prognosis was not going to be good, that I was going to be scarred with third-degree burns basically on my stomach, and there was really nothing else that they could do. Maybe I could have gotten grafts, but that would have been expensive, later on as I grew older. But for the most part, he did prescribe like an antibiotic, some kind of burn cream. It came in a little blue container. And he said it was very powerful. And then after that, finished that, basically I needed to, just change the dress. My mom would need to change the dressings every day, and then ultimately put Vaseline on it, on the area. Well, my mom had strong faith in that, and that I would not stay scarred. And to this day, I am not making this up. I swear by everything that is beautiful and a vibration of love in the universe, I am not scarred in my stomach area. So this is such a powerful testimonial on the power of spirit, the power of angels, and the power of the universe. That's why I say doctors are not always right. And I'm not discrediting doctors, because we need them. We need them here in the physical world to heal us. That's what they do. I think my doctor was awesome. But to a certain point, doctors and nurses, they are trained by what is they go through, in medical school, medical training. And it's, they give you a prognosis, or they give clients prognosis, our patients a prognosis, and that's the final say. But a body, our souls are so resilient that they can heal ourselves as well. And I feel like, and in some kind of way, this was a miracle in my life, a second miracle, where my angels were there in the form of nurses. And also, the response time, everything was so quick. Had this happened at the house, and I would have, had to later call the ambulance, the ambulance would have been called. I was a little boy. So, I think if the circumstances were different in a different setting or environment, maybe the outcome would have been different. But the fact that this happened in a hospital, it's so, touching. I mean, if you think, I think back at it, you know, all these years now, and I'm like, you know, doctors are not always right. And I know that when I read stories of other people who have cancer, or, you know, they've been burned themselves, burn victims, that, you know, things are not always as the doctors, you know, share their prognosis, or their, you know, they diagnose you with a certain, you know, condition or something. It, you know, many times miracles happen, and I do feel like I am a living and walking miracle on this. Another experience that I had was when I was in elementary school. I was bullied by a lot of children, and one day I was at one of the monkey bars, and I was just, you know, it's one of the ones where you do like the exercises for chin ups, but I was just swinging from it, you know, because I was little and I could reach the bars, and, you know, my feet were elevated up off the ground. And this other little girl, this other girl, she came from behind me and she pushed me, and I lost my grip and I fell down flat on my chin. I could have broken my jaw. I was in severe pain, but my guardian angels, I feel, saved me in that particular instance. Um, you know, if I wouldn't have, it's possible that I would have had, you know, some damage to my jaw. I could have easily broken my neck from that fall. You know, so these are life situations, that experiences that I've had personally, and I feel like they were my guardian angels. And I have so many that I'm going to be sharing throughout this this video, you know, this podcast, YouTube podcast. The other experience that I remember having was being in a vehicle with my mom in 1992. 1990, 91, I think it was about 91, but we were at this stoplight, and my mom had this 1980 something Cutlass, and it was kind of like a goldish in color. Well, we were at this stoplight, and I was in the back seat, and I had a tendency never to wear seatbelts. I just didn't like them, and I should have, you know, been wearing my seatbelt. But that day, I remember just I had also a tendency to be in the back seat and kind of like, you know, move forward to the front, lean to the front, and I was holding on tight, and all of a sudden this older lady driving a Cadillac, she was driving around 30 to 40 miles per hour, and we were the first ones at the stoplight, and it was red, and she just rams into the back of our vehicle. And my mom, in an attempt to save me or to check on my well-being, twisted, and she dislocated her spine in this accident, and I was untouched, unscathed, no cuts, bruises, nothing. And I feel like my guardian angels, we had a gas tank in the back of the car as well, and all the back was basically pushed in. This was a horrible car accident, you know, that we were basically rammed from the back. And I could have, you know, easily been ejected maybe from the pressure all the way to the front windshield. You know, there's many scenarios that play out now in my mind as I think back at this. You know, I could have been easily ejected from the vehicle. I could have, you know, had some kind of concussion. There could have been a massive explosion with the gasoline tank in the back, but there wasn't. So I was saved in many ways from a lot of this, and it was just, it's a beautiful thing to just know that, you know, that spirit and angels are always guiding you, and they are protecting you. And that was just one of the many experiences that I had. The other experience that I remember having very clearly would have been when I was 16 years old, and in 1998, our south side of the city flooded and inundated with several inches of a river water, because we lived on the south side of town in very close proximity to the river. So the river levees, like Katrina, and I talk about this in a podcast that I had done with my friend Pam, but I'm going into more detail. Well, that day, the river levees broke, and it was early morning. It was on October 21st, 1998, that this happened. And I'll never forget that day. In the morning, you know, it was around 7 a.m. I got up and ate breakfast, and it was just my mom and myself. And we were, you know, just watching TV, and all of it, because school had been canceled due to these floods. But they never shared the magnitude that it would, you know, it would have on us. They did want us to evacuate, but we had never really had gone through a flooding, you know, of that nature to even expect it. Well, That morning we heard these big sounds of thunder, and it felt like basically like an explosion. And we heard it very clearly, and then we looked out and we could see the ground slowly filling up with water, river water. And it didn't give us any chance to get in the vehicle that we had at the time and actually just throw in some clothes and get out. This when the river levees broke, in a matter of like 10 to 15 minutes, it was already almost like at 7 feet, no, well, like a 5 feet of river water. And I was at that time I was about 5'6", and my mom's 5'2", and we were walking. We left the house finally because the power had been shut off, and we lived in a small block, and there was this house with a veranda. But we got out of the home that we were living in, and we walked, because it wasn't that far up where in the neighborhood that we lived in, that maybe about 4 blocks down, the elevation starts going up. And we lived in what we call in a hill place. It was like almost like a hill, but we were on the very bottom part of the hill. Well, we didn't have a chance, and I don't know how to swim. My mom doesn't know how to swim, but we did manage to put some clothes in trash bags and use them as kind of like an anchor to walk down the way. And all the way down, walking out the neighborhood, the water was up almost around our chest area, and it was just coming. You could see currents, debris floating, animals, and it was just a horrific experience. In that moment, at 16 years old, when I saw all of this and not, being able to swim, I felt death. I really felt like I wasn't going to make it. That's the feeling of devastation that I had. So in many ways, I've had a near-death experience, but in many ways, this was almost like you know, a pre-near death experience, how I refer to it. And it was so devastating, and I actually felt death. I felt like I wasn't going to make it. And halfway through walking, we made it to a house that was in the neighborhood that was elevated, and it was elevated way up off the ground. And I remember walking to that, and my mom was walking backwards behind, not walking towards the current, but putting her back towards the current to make it, and holding me. I was walking towards the current, and I remember getting a cramp in my leg, in my calf area, midway, and I just couldn't walk. I was stuck, and I said, I don't think I'm going to make it. And I just kept walking. As painful as it was, we made it to the veranda, luckily. I really feel like these were our guardian angels, protecting us and guiding us. And we made it to the veranda, and as I was on that, because this house was elevated with an elevated porch, I remember that they had trained us in school at a very young age that if you're in need of help, to scream for help. So I remember screaming for help. Somebody help me. And helicopters were in the area looking down, but they didn't really do anything. I, waved my arms and everything. Well, I really felt like we were going to die in that house, in that porch, that day. I, I really, I said to my mom, if something does happen, just know that I always will love you. And I'm sorry that we're going through this now. It wasn't my fault, but I felt at the time, that maybe if we would have, taken it a little bit more seriously, we would have, been prevented this. So, basically I kept screaming at the top of my lungs for help. And two people, like I said, we were not that far from elevation, going up what they call a hill of territory of the land going up. And some people that were in a far away, I would say maybe about 2 blocks down, 3 blocks down, heard us, and they were at the elevated part, where it was still dry. The water hadn't touched them, and they heard us, and they came toward us. They luckily knew how to swim, and they came with those floaty devices. It was like those floating foam sticks that you can wrap around and kind of use to propel you. And I remember that they said, come with us, we'll help you, even though you don't know how to swim. We were terrified, and we couldn't, leave our belongings behind. We had just very few. And so we told them no, basically no, that we couldn't do it. And to call for help, to make sure that they got a rescue boat to us. So they said they would. They went back, and we were like, are they going to just leave us here, or are they going to call? Because you never know in that kind of situation. There's so many thoughts running through your head, fear, anxiety. You're basically facing your own fate. in many ways. And I remember that they actually did call um, the rescue team, and they came in a boat to rescue us. And the guys that were, I guess, EMTs, or the people in the rescue team, they were all dressed in blue shirts. And I remember the words that they said, and they were not joking when they said that. They said, "Why didn't y'all evacuate when y'all were told to?" And I explained to them that that we explained to them that we just didn't expect that to happen. And they understood, and they said, "Well, we're your guardian angels." And I remember just listening to that and being floored at 16 years old, hearing that, because that was validation to me that my guardian angels were there and they were helping us and protecting us. So we got on the boat, and we, were taken up to a safe area, and the rest is history. And that was another experience that I had with, which I call, my guardian angels were there protecting us. And, it was a miracle in the making. That was at 16 years old. And, going forward, I've had a lot of other experience. The last one that I'm going to share with you, for the intents and purposes of this video, and the story time, is one that happened in 2013. This was before my near-death experience, but I was already working at the last job that I was going to be in. And being that we were just my mom and myself in one vehicle, the vehicle broke, and we couldn't, repair it. We didn't have the money to repair it, so we had to take the public transportation system, which are like transit buses, to get to and from. I remember this one instance, that I was taking the bus, and we basically, to get to our home, you had to go get on the bus stop nearest my job where I worked at. And once you are in that pickup station, or that hub where they pick you up, you have to transfer to another location and take another bus from there, and they give you a pass when you get that. Well, that afternoon I got on the bus, and I went to the location where they transfer, and they give you that little transfer paper. And I remember the bus where they left us is on the opposite side of the street, and then there's another hub on the other side to pick up people and take them to other parts of the city, which would have been where I live, that I would have had to catch that bus. Well, I remember walking across the street, and midway my paper flew from my hand, and you need the paper in order to get onto the next bus to transfer. And that, where the bus was positioned and where I was standing when that paper flew in the middle of the street, it wasn't really even a windy day that I remember. There is oncoming traffic from the back, and you can't see. And I remember that paper flew, and I was just like so tempted to get it, because I knew I needed it. And I said, it'll just be 1 minute, and something held me back, literally. I felt something holding me back. And I really feel like these were my guardian angels. And part of me, kept resisting my free will. I wanted to, I was stubborn. I've always been stubborn, and I wanted to do it, just go and get the paper. The instant that I was about to do that, I just stopped in my tracks, and I can't explain it other than like being paralyzed and being frozen, not in fear, but like somebody's holding you back, and a higher power. And right in that split second, a vehicle came probably about 40 miles per hour down on the side of that bus. Had I crossed that road, I would probably not be living right now to talk about this. And I was protected by my guardian angel. I know for a fact that I was. The guy looked at me, and his eyes were big, and he was like, "You don't need the paper." He signaled to me to just come in the bus. But that's the power of angels. That's the power of spirit. I really feel like, if I would have gone forward, I wouldn't be here. I would be in spirit basically right now. And I've had other experiences, too many to name here, but it's just amazing how we take a lot of things for granted. We never give thanks to our angels. For those of you that are listening to this podcast here on my YouTube channel, if you're going through anything difficult in your life, or you've been through a near-death experience, you've been in a bad car accident, and you know that you should have maybe come out with damages, or you should have been, seriously injured, but you were unscathed, or you had minimal damage, whatever you have gone through, take a moment and thank your angels, because ultimately I am a firm believer that our guardian angels are around us, and they are protecting us from everything that occurs in our life. We may not see them, we may not feel them all the time, but they're there, and they are watching, and they are on standby. And just like you call 911 for dispatch, and you expect them to come to your rescue, your angels, your guardian angels, are also there, and they're there watching and protecting you. Now, there's certain things that, a lot of people may be listening to this, and they'll be like, well, my so and so got murdered, or why weren't my guardian angels there when I got seriously hurt? You have to understand, there's certain circumstances, I believe, that are pre-written by in our soul contract that we cannot change. It's fate and it's destiny. But there are certain events that do happen due to our free will, like the things that I explained to you, basically not listening to, someone that's wise, and not listening to your higher self when you know something is probably dangerous or you shouldn't be doing something. And you still go ahead and do it. That's when we enter into these hard lessons and these hardships. So if you've gone through anything that you should have really been hurt, or you could have been a bad situation, but you were somehow prevented by something, or you feel like you were protected in some kind of way, these were your guardian angels and a higher power protecting you. Give thanks to the universe. Be grateful for your guardian angels. Pray to them. Talk to them. You know, thank them. Don't take anything for granted. Don't take them for granted. They put up with so much of our nonsense and our foolery that we go through on a daily basis. So this is my story of my personal experiences with angels, and I always say I have been touched by an angel, just like the show, which I know is trademarked. But I also like to say that I talk with angels, because ultimately when I'm connecting and I'm doing, readings, or, doing any kind of my spiritual work, I always talk to my angels, and I have that communication, and I know that they're there for me. So I want to thank all of my angels that, are listening from the other side and that are here with me. Thank you so much for being here, for me, and all of you earth angels that are listening to this podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my story. Again, this is me being vulnerable. I don't like to, really share a lot of my personal stories or life, not because I have anything to hide, but just that's the way that I am, So I'm really opening up and being an open book, and I want to share more stories about things, my experiences in paranormal. So stay tuned, because I will be having more videos and more podcasts in this kind of format, basically coming out and talking more about my experiences with the paranormal, my experiences that I've had, in all things spiritual. And I hope that you can take from this a lot of life lessons, and a lot of powerful messages, not to just empower you, but to help you open you up to new possibilities, and also to appreciate life in a greater manner. So blessings and love and light. Thank you so much for being on my channel. If you did like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And if you would like to set up a private reading with me, again, all my information will be listed in the description box below. Blessings and love and light. Have an amazing day.